greatest duo. There's nothing like a great duo. 2 flavors, 1 bag. New Jack Link's Duos.
Welcome back to the PFF NFL show. Trevor, Sikkema, Dalton, Wasserman here with you guys for another draft grades episode where we're digging a little bit deeper, post recap show into what happened with your team and tell you what we think of the players of the draft. Today we're talking the AFC and NFC South. Taking it south today. We went with the north yesterday, going south. So you know how the directional things work. Dalton, how we doing, my friend?
Good. I think, look, this group of teams has some of our favorite draft classes and some of the most interesting draft classes, I think. So I'm excited to talk about them.
Yeah, let's get well, actually, I was going to say let's get into it right away, but I forgot that I got to tell the good people that the 25% off promo code at PFF is still active. If you don't have a PFF Plus subscription, you can get one right now for 25% off using the promo code DRAFT25. That's how you get that there. And it's not just the draft stuff that we're recapping here. It's everything. It's a year-long subscription. So you get the premium stats during football season. You'll get the fantasy football tools to help win your fantasy league. We've got some new betting tools that are coming out this year that are awesome, that are going to be fantastic for anybody out there that likes to do a little betting while they're watching some sports. So check it out. Now's the time to save some money on it. 25% off. Draft25 is the promo code to be able to do that. Almost jumped the gun, Dalton, because, I'm excited to talk about the first team that's right here on the show rundown, and that's my own Tampa Bay Buccaneers here. Let's start with the NFC South, and let's talk about the Buccaneers. Look at their draft haul there. Dalton, good football players. I didn't think that they were going to get drafted by the Buccaneers, especially the guy at the very top, Emeka Egbuka. I felt like wide receiver was very much a luxury for this team, but clearly they just couldn't pass up on the player. So they go Emeka Egbuka in the first round. They take the chance on Benjamin Morrison in the second round with him suffering the hip injury earlier this season, sort of dealing with that, wondering what he's going to be like post-hip injury. Third round, they stuck in the secondary and went with Jacob Parrish. Fourth round, this is where they finally addressed the trenches. David Walker, the edge rusher, and then the versatile defensive lineman, Elijah Roberts here. And then in the seventh round, they got a guy who, I understand the concerns over him, how much of an outlier he would be for the NFL, given the fact that he's like the third lightest football player to ever come in the NFL over the last 25, 30 years, and Tez Johnson. But great tape. He got great tape this past year, had great tape at the Senior Bowl. So the PFF staff gave this one a B+. What would you give the Buccaneers draft?
I could probably agree with that. I think, look, in a vacuum, you look at the 6 football players they got, and they're all really good players. Some of my favorite players to watch in college football over the last couple of years. It's interesting that Jason Light stuck with what essentially must have been just the top player on his board with the 19th overall pick in Emeka Egbuka when he's already got a loaded receiver room. Now, this is once again the last year of Mike Evans' contract, and maybe he goes 1 year at a time or starts getting into the Larry Fitzgerald method of just going one-year contract at a time. They've done it with Levante David at linebacker. Maybe now they'll do it with Mike Evans. But either way, now you've got an extremely loaded receiving core with Egbuka, with Evans, with Chris Godwin, with Jalen McMillan, even guys like Trey Palmer behind them, Tez Johnson you mentioned in the 7th round. So they're certainly not short on weapons on offense. And then I really like the value of even the next 4 players that they got. Double dipping at corner with Ben Morrison, who honestly, if he's healthy, I think is the 4th best cornerback in this draft. Had great tape at Notre Dame and just got to get over the hip injury. Jacob Parrish I had as a top 10 corner, gives you some inside-outside versatility. You mentioned And part of this to me was, and I was wondering if they would draft a safety, but you mentioned that Tyke Smith might move back to safety in a more traditional safety role than the slot role, and maybe Parrish gets in the slot here. And now they've got a ton of options at corner, right? You've got McCollum, you've got Jamel Dean, you've got Tyke Smith who can play in the slot, Jacob Parrish, Ben Morrison. So they're certainly not short on the outside on either side of the ball. And then even on day 3, I have to like this pair of edge rushers they got. I really like David Walker when I dug in deep, and I thought he reminded me of Josiah Stewart a lot from Michigan. He was an alternative to that sort of player, undersized, explosive, really productive pass rusher. And Elijah Roberts from SMU has been one of my favorite players to watch in college football over the last couple of years. So you get the speed with Walker, you get the power with Roberts. Overall, 6 really good football players. I would just say the only thing I was a little surprised about, and this kind of comes with their first-round pick, too, is not attacking the linebacker position, right? I mean, they're really kind of thin right now. It's Levante David and Micah Walker is what we're looking at starting at linebacker for them. So that's kind of the weak spot on this team for me right now.
They like Savashier Dennis, who missed most of last year with an injury, so I think that they are hoping that he's going to be a starting linebacker for them moving forward. But they need another one. There's no question about it. They still have Levante David, but they're going to need another one long term. Not touching linebacker, obviously something that was a bit of a surprise, but it just felt like, with Chris Paul lasting until the 5th round, or I think it was like pick 172 where he ended up getting drafted. I mean, him lasting until the 5th round sort of just told you what the league thinks of this linebacker class. They just didn't think very highly of it. So that was probably included with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as well. I don't think you can go worse than a B+ for the Bucs draft, just because of what you said. They've just got such great football players that they acquired, and they feel good about it. But it could be even higher. If you could give it an A-, you could even give it an A, and I wouldn't really fight you too much on it with that kind of value, because if you just believe in the guys they brought in, I still feel like they hit corner pretty hard. They hit defensive line pretty hard. Yeah, they didn't hit linebacker, but it's such a lower valued position that it's something that you can get good linebackers every year. I'm intrigued. This draft would have... It's funny because if they would have drafted Jahad Campbell at 19, like let's say they were okay with the shoulder injury, they draft Jahad Campbell at number 19. I don't think that you would find anybody anywhere that would have given this less than an A- at the very worst, because they were hitting all their needs with really talented players, but they end up going with Igbokwe here. And I think that the thought process there is Chris Godwin's coming back from injury. Best case scenario, he's ready for week 1 next season. I think that would be very lucky of them if he were to be the player they need him to be in week 1. So now you have a bit of an insurance policy where Igbokwe can step in right away. You don't have to rush Chris Godwin back. They have Mike Evans, maybe for another 1 to 2 years, but Igbokwe's already sort of the succession plan to Evans, and depending on what happens and how Chris Godwin looks after injury, I get it. I do get it. I didn't think that we were going to get this kind of a draft class with Tampa Bay, them getting so far ahead of what felt like maybe a longer-term wide receiver need, but it's hard to argue the football players that they brought in here. Let's go to the Atlanta Falcons next for their draft haul. In the first round, at number 15 overall, they took Jalen Walker, the linebacker/edge from Georgia. And then later in the first round, they gave up a future first to trade up from 46 all the way to 26. They jumped 20 spots to take James Pierce Jr., the edge rusher from Tennessee. Third round, they got, in my opinion, quite the steal in Xavier Watts, the safety from Notre Dame. Fourth round, Billy Bowman Jr., the safety from Oklahoma, more of a slot defender than necessarily just a safety. So I think that was great value as well. And then Jack Nelson, the offensive tackle from Wisconsin, there in the 7th round. What do we think of the Falcons draft here, Dalton?
I think they had one goal with this defense, and that was to find playmakers. And that's the theme, I think, with those first 4 guys. When you talk about Jalen Walker in limited reps as a pass rusher, but a really good one, 12 sacks over the last 2 years and a 17% pass rush win rate this past year. James Pierce Jr. the last 2 years, 107 pressures, 21 sacks, one of the best pass rushers in college football down there at Tennessee. And then you've got Watts and Bowman, and you mentioned it, getting Watts at the 96 overall pick when I had him as a top 40 player on my board, I think is an absolute steal. It actually makes up for at least a little bit of that surplus value that they lost in the trade, in the Pierce trade, sending next year's first-round pick to the Rams. So you get those 2 guys who've combined for 21 interceptions over the last 2 years. And when you think about all those numbers, I think that's the theme of this Falcons defense. We don't force the action enough. We don't disrupt quarterbacks enough. We don't get to the football enough in the secondary. They're trying to change that mentality, because right now their defense, it's bend but don't break. They had the 2nd worst pass rush grade in the league last year. And the strategy I find interesting, especially how highly they value Pierce to give that up for him to go up. I believe it was from 46 to 26 to go get him. We had this conversation on draft night. They must have felt like they were probably going to take Pierce at number 15. And then they were surprised that Walker was there, so they got Walker and Pierce. And on their board, it's possible that they got 2 of their top 15 players. So I think for them, you have to consider this draft a success. They got pass rush help. They got help in the secondary. Maybe could have attacked corner instead of safety a second time, but I think they can survive with what they have there, and especially with all the zone defense that Raheem Morris plays. It's really going to help them more so to have Walker. They already have Caden Ellis, who's kind of a similar player at linebacker, gets a lot done in the pass rush. To get Pierce, to get Braylon Trice healthy, if this team has a better pass rush, they have a lot better chance of stopping opponents, right? And they just couldn't do that often enough because there was too many quarterbacks and too many clean pockets.
No, yeah, I agree with everything that you said there. It's interesting looking at this draft. I forgot to say at the top, but PFF staff gave this an A- for the draft that they had, and that includes the wheeling and dealing of the first-round pick and then getting the third-round pick back, jumping up, being able to do that, because it's hard to not look at this roster and think, wow, or this draft haul, and say, wow, this team got a lot better on the defense side of the football in the ways that they needed to get better. They needed to get more dynamic in the secondary. They get 2 players who are ball hawks in the secondary, in Billy Bowman Jr. and Xavier Watts. They needed to get more explosive on the edge. They absolutely did with James Pierce Jr. And then Jalen Walker, it's sort of hard to judge this one, because even though I don't know where his home base is going to be in the NFL, it feels like it's going to be at edge rusher for the Falcons. There's another guy who brings a lot of speed to power to his game. He really just hasn't played as a true edge rusher a lot, mainly because he's not built like one. And Georgia, I think, just said, wow, this is such a good football player. We've just got to get him on the field and use him in a lot of different ways. And perhaps he's just going to turn into a true defensive chess piece for Raheem Morris. I like the idea of him being in this defense. I think that the James Pierce Jr. trade-up is very interesting, because to me, it is still an extension of what they did last year. Now, I don't think they regret taking Michael Penix. Very clearly, it didn't end up working out with Kirk Cousins, and can you imagine where this team would be right now if they didn't have Michael Penix? So I don't think that they regret doing that. However, by not taking a pass rusher last year at number 8 overall, when you desperately needed one, and there were some good ones in this class to choose from, we then saw them try to make up for that desperately by picking defensive linemen with their next 3 selections in Ruka Rororo, Braylon Trice, and Brandon Dorless last season. This almost makes it feel like, to me, this is still an extension of, okay, we are making up for going quarterback at number 8 when we should have. I don't want to say, again, should have is the wrong word. I don't mean to use the word should have, because they don't regret the Penix pick. But they've had to now throw so many resources at their defensive line and at the pass rushing positions, because they haven't been able to acquire the talent that they've needed. And they've been a very poor pass rush team over the last couple of seasons, and they don't want to be this upcoming year. So just very interesting for me to think about it like that. Still needing pass rushers so desperately this year, just like they did last year. And it's a little bit of a continued ripple effect with what they did with number 8 overall and Michael Penix Jr. last year. Xavier Watts, though, dude, I couldn't love it anymore. Him and Jesse Bates are going to be a sick duo.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you talk about Jesse Bates is already one of the best ball hawks in the league, and now you add Watts into that, and it gives them the ability, with Watts and his ability to play single high, for them to mix up the defense a little bit more. If they want to go 2 high with both of them back there, if they want to go 1 high, if they want to mess around and get more guys in there, they want to get Billy Bowman in there, you're going to have a lot of guys who are hunting the football in Atlanta, and they haven't had that enough lately.
Before we get to our next team, give you our next draft grade here, I've got to talk to all the parents out there. What's your child's future success look like for you? Maybe it's them owning their own business, them just living a comfortable life in a wonderful home. Maybe it's them traveling the world. Whatever it is, you can help them achieve that even right now with a kids investment account from Fabric by Gerber Life. Fabric by Gerber Life was designed by parents for parents to make it easy to plan for and manage your family's financial path. With a kids investment account from Fabric, you can start investing in your child's future right now. Kids can't invest while they're minors, but this kids investment account allows you to invest on their behalf, gives their investment so much more time to grow. The whole thing is online. Setting up an account could take as little as just 5 minutes, and then you manage everything right from your phone. It starts you as $20. There's no contribution limits to it. Tax advantages, SIPC insured up to $500,000. Funds can be used for basically anything when they're not, and it's not just when they're older either. When they're kids, it's tuition, it's tutors, it's music classes, it's sporting events, and then when they're older, maybe it is helping them start their own business, buying their first house, traveling the world, whatever that looks like. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their family. Start investing in your child's future today at meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. That's meetfabric.com/PFFNFL, MEET, fabric.com/PFFNFL. Portfolios are managed by Fort Washington Investment Advisors Incorporated. Additional services provided by Apex Clearing Corporation. All investing is subject to risk. You can learn more at meetfabric.com. Sticking along the NFC South draft halls, Dalton, let's get to one that was tied for the best draft haul that I had graded this year, and that was with the Carolina Panthers. Our staff gave this an A+. I gave this an A+. Curious if you echoed the sentiment here. We had Tetero and McMillan going in the first round for this team, and then they went to the defensive line with Nick Scorton and Prince Umanmielen on day 2. Trevor Etienne, running back 2 of the future, I think, for this team in the 4th round, along with a guy who I think could start at safety opposite Trayvon Merrick in Lathan Ransom. They got a great interior defender in Cameron Jackson in the 5th, as well as tight end Mitchell Evans. And then in the 6th round, Jimmy Horn Jr., the wide receiver out of Colorado. Again, A+ here for me, Dalton, A+ from the PFF staff. Do you echo the sentiment, or are you a hater?
No, easy A+. My favorite class in the entire league. I love every single one of these picks. I absolutely love it. And it starts with taking Tetero and McMillan 8th overall. It's something we talked about for a long time leading up to the draft is, look, we know they're the lowest graded defense in football. We know they need a star on defense, but this is, especially on the defensive line, a very deep draft guys you can get on day 2, and they got a couple of really good ones, actually 3 really good ones, day 2 and day 3. I'll add Cam Jackson in there because I think he's perfect for what they need in their run defense. But it's the mindset of starting out with McMillan, building around Bryce Young, who, when he came back off the bench last year through the end of the regular season, 6th best passing grade in football, second, I believe it was the 2nd best big-time throw rate. Bryce Young really started to figure it out down the stretch, and now you get a true number 1 weapon for him in McMillan. This offense could be dangerous with Etienne in there. Now you've got 3 good backs in Hubbard, Dowdle, and Etienne. I really like their tight end room with Mitchell Evans added in there with Tommy Tremble and Jatavian Sanders, who I think you'll see move around the formation a lot. They're deep at receiver. They have a good offensive line. This Panthers offense, as long as Bryce Young keeps making the progress that he did the second half of last year, this is going to start to be fun to watch. And I think McMillan to be that guy who can win one-on-one on the outside is extremely important for them. And then you have to love, especially these 2 day 2 picks. Nick Scorton, a great value late in the 2nd round. Princely Umanmielen, a great value in the 3rd round. I thought he should have been a 2nd round pick. You talk about this team being last in so many categories, especially on the defensive line, and what they added in free agency, what they added with these 3 players in the draft. I think they are going to slowly get a lot better. The one position they couldn't address was linebacker. They'll figure that out as they go. But when you look at the job they've done up front, you mentioned Lathan Ransom at safety as well with Trayvon Merrick. I think this team is going to be a lot better. I don't know if they're a playoff contender yet, but if you talk about building around Bryce Young and filling in the holes otherwise, they did a fantastic job.
Yeah, I think that phrase that you just said there is still really important that I think a lot of people forgot about. Going into last season, remember, like going into the 2024 season, we all said the same things. This is just about figuring out if Bryce Young is the guy. And that was what the whole offseason was supposed to be about, making sure that you draft the wide receivers, get the offensive line that you need, get the running game that you need, all of that. Like, it was all to figuring out the question, is Bryce Young the guy? He has 2 terrible games to start the season, so much so that he gets benched. Only comes back in because Andy Dalton had that thumb injury, but then Bryce Young looked really good. I think that we forget that even though Bryce Young looked good at the second half of last season, the question is still there. Given the fact that he played so terrible that he was benched at the beginning of the season, you still have to ask the question, is Bryce Young the guy? Does he come out hot this regular season? Does he hit the ground running right where he left off last year? Because if he does, then he is going to be the guy for you. But you still have a responsibility to make the team better around him, to make sure that you can answer that question as confidently as possible. So that is a big reason why I love the Tetero and McMillan pick, independent of how much I liked him as a prospect. And then the thing that I love about the Panthers, and the reason why this draft is, it feels like unanimous A and A+, it's because of the value. You mentioned that. It's the value of these picks. Nick Scorton and Prince Umanmielen, both of those players are guys that we have talked about as potential first rounders before, back end of the first round guys, right? But when we talk about them as back end of the first round guys, a lot of times you bring up the positives of why they would be considered there, but also the negatives of why they wouldn't. Prince Umanmielen, all right, well, is he an every down defender? You know, is he going to be good for you on run defense downs? Is he just a designated pass rusher? Nick Scorton, the numbers weren't as good this past year. You liked him more as a stand-up outside linebacker. The weights kind of fluctuated between his time at Purdue and Texas A&M. What kind of a player are we getting here? The thing is that when you draft a guy in the first round, you have to really talk about those questions. When you draft Nick Scorton in the second, it doesn't really matter. You basically, that's such good value that you only have to focus on what he does well. The same exact thing with Prince Umanmielen. Getting him in the third round means even if he is just a designated pass rusher, great. Especially for the incredible first step that this guy has and the bend that he has. You don't have to worry about a lot of the negatives. Cameron Jackson's another one. When people talk about Cameron Jackson, how much of an ox he is in the run game in the middle of the defensive line, in run defense, you go, man, he's so good, I consider him in the third round. But when you consider him in the third round, you go, pass rush win percentage was just 6.6% this past year. Is he ever going to give you anything on passing downs? You don't have to worry about that as a fifth rounder. He's a fifth. He could be exactly what he is, and you could just lean into his strengths. So this whole class is full of great value, good fits, and I think it just advances what the Panthers are trying to do so well. So I agree with you. A+ on this draft. Anything else on the Panthers before we get to the Saints, the last team in this division?
I mean, I just look at the D-line and everything they've added this offseason. Bobby Brown, Tershawn Wharton, Pat Jones, Nick Scorton, Prince Umanmielen, Cam Jackson, and they're getting Derek Brown back because he only played one game last year before suffering a season-ending injury. So you've got a brand-new defensive line in Carolina that should be a lot better as a unit.
Let's talk about the New Orleans Saints, the final team here in this division. At the top, they drafted Kelvin Banks Jr., number 9 overall. In the second round, they went with Tyler Shuck, the quarterback out of Louisville. Third round, Vernon Broughton, the defensive lineman from the Saints. Third round, they go Jonas Sanker, the safety from Virginia. Fourth round, pair of picks here, Danny Stutzman and Quincy Riley on the defense side of the football. They get Devin Neal in the sixth. And then in the seventh, a pair of picks, Mordecai Matavao, the tight end from UCLA, and then edge rusher Fidel Diggs. The PFF staff gave this one a C+ here, Dalton. So C range appropriate for the Saints? What do you think?
I think so. I think I'm good with a C+. You could argue a B-. Like, I'll start at the top. The Kelvin Banks pick is the right pick. I think it's an excellent pick. I think when you think about Banks' stock was kind of up and down throughout this pre-draft process, but I think he deserves certainly to go in the top 15, and 9th overall slides in right here. And I think I like the idea of moving Talisa Fuaga back to the right side where he played in college, getting Banks in at left tackle. They declined the fifth-year option on Trevor Penning. Maybe move him into that left guard spot, see if he can succeed at guard. We've seen that now in the past. Certainly the Eagles with Mekhi Becton did it last year. It's the rest of this draft that you have to really sit here and kind of nitpick. I think the first part of it is, was it really worth taking Tyler Shuck with the 40th overall pick when you could have probably had another starting caliber player in there, especially along the defensive line where they needed it? And I know they took Vernon Broughton, but I think another one would have been fine for them. And do they really feel like Tyler Shuck on a team in the middle of what should be a rebuild, although they'll never admit it? Is he really the guy? Because now it seems like with Carr's injury and Spencer Rattler's struggles last year that Shuck is the most likely guy to start week 1 unless he doesn't show you anything in the preseason. So I have a hard time. I'm in between on this one. I love the Banks pick. I'm not a huge fan of the Shuck pick. And the rest of the guys, I like them as role players, right? Broughton, Sanker, Stutzman, Riley. I think Devin Neal steps in there as their RB2 right now. That's a really good value in the 6th round. So I think they got a lot of role players. A lot of it's going to depend on Tyler Shuck. Does he prevent you from maybe, if you're bad enough, taking a quarterback in the 1st round next year and resetting that clock again? But I think the Kelvin Banks pick is really good, and then we can really debate the rest of the draft.
I think that you're going about it the right way. If you believe in Tyler Shuck, I think this draft is probably a B+, right? If you don't believe in Tyler Shuck, I think it's a C+, because there's some things that they did well that the prop of the draft. I agree with you. I think getting Kelvin Banks to throw Talisa Fuaga back to the right side, push Trevor Penning on the inside. We talk about these offensive line theories all the time. I feel like when we do mock drafts and this is why this would make sense, and then the teams never actually do it. How many times did we talk about them drafting an offensive lineman there at number 9 to do this exact thing? And so I think that it is very smart of them to do that. It gets the most out of not just the player that they are drafting drafting at number 9 at a premium position in Kelvin Banks, but also gets the most out of Talise Fuanga, also potentially gets the most out of Trevor Penning going into a contract year, as they didn't pick up that 5th-year option for him. So I think this was a domino effect type of pick at number 9 that I think is great. I'm not a Tyler Shuck believer, so I'm not going to like the selection at number 40. And then the Vernon Broughton pick, I like Vernon Broughton, but Landon Jackson was picked one pick after this, and I think that Landon Jackson is sort of just a better version of what you would get out of Vernon Broughton, as sort of that versatile 3-4 defensive end type. He's got some athleticism to him. He's got some length to him, but I think that Landon Jackson's more powerful. I think he's more athletic. I think he's built better than Vernon Broughton. I think Jordan Birch was still on the board at this point as well. Princely Umanmielen was still on the board there as well. And so all of those guys, I just would have taken over Vernon Broughton. Jared Ivey was too, but Jared Ivey ends up going undrafted and wasn't even a priority UDFA pick. So I have no idea what happened there. So I'm not even going to throw that into the equation. Sanker's a good pick. Stutzman's a good pick. Riley's a good pick. Neal's a good pick. Like I like those picks from the Saints, but I do end up giving this a C+ just because I don't believe in Tyler Shuck. So it's sort of hard for me to totally buy in on what they did. And then even though I think the Vernon Broughton pick is fine, there are other players, even at the same position, that I would have preferred over a player like that.
And this is where I'm at with Shuck, is when you look at he went 40th, but then I look at players that went a spot or a few spots after him. T.J. Sanders, Donovan Ezeraku, J.T. Tuimoloau, Will Johnson, Ben Morrison. I think those are all players that could have helped them on defense. So we'll see. If Shuck works out, look, you got your quarterback, but I also look at the value of what they miss, especially a guy like Will Johnson, who I thought, if teams liked his health and his medicals, could have been in consideration for 9th overall there. We had him as a top 15 player. I do wonder about the opportunity cost at 40th overall with Tyler Shuck, when it was pretty clear, aside from Jackson Dart with the Giants, that the league wasn't very high on this quarterback class at all, right? Even Jalen Milroe falling towards the end of the 3rd round. Obviously, Shedeur Sanders in the 5th got all the headlines. So you just wonder if that move could have been made later and they could have got a starting caliber player, to me, especially on defense, on a defense that needs those types of players so badly.
Let's flip over to the AFC South and talk about, I don't know if this is a polarizing draft. I feel like I've heard a pretty big praise for it, but there is some nuance that I want to get into with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Obviously, at the very top, they get aggressive, go from number 5 to number 2, and trade up to get Travis Hunter. Don't have a 2nd-round pick because they give a future first and this year's 2nd-round pick to make that happen. So we then have to jump all the way down to the 3rd round. They had 2 3rd-round picks, safety Caleb Bransaw, and then offensive lineman Wyatt Milam. 4th round, they had a pair of speedsters, Bayshal Tootin and Jack Kaiser. 6th round, J.M. McLeod and Rayon Lane, the safety from Navy. 7th round, they go with Jonah Monheim and LaQuint Allen. We gave this a B+ draft here for the Jacksonville Jaguars. What'd you think of it, Dalton?
I think so. I mean, it depends on how much value you feel they're getting out of Travis Hunter, right? I think our good friend Max Chadwick talked about, well, with Hunter, it's possible that you're getting 2 players in one, and he's worth 2 first-round picks, right? If he can find a way to play both ways. The Jags have made it very clear that he's going to play receiver first, and he's going to be that partner for Brian Thomas Jr., and he's going to make Trevor Lawrence's life a lot easier. And they must have felt to do that he was clearly wide receiver 1 in this class, even ahead of Tetero and McMillan. I could see the argument. I get it. Hunter's a special athlete with special ball skills, and obviously if he can help them at all at corner, which they've signed Jordan Lewis, and they're starting to get it together in the secondary, but if he can help them at corner as well, then you've got a whole different value that possibly makes him the most valuable non-quarterback in football. And I think that's what you're really talking about. When you talk about his value and how it could translate if he can help you on both sides of the ball, it is in the range of PFF WAR of like a low-end starting quarterback, which a lot of teams in that case, we've seen it in the draft, we just saw it with Jackson Dart and the Giants, they'll give up an extra first-round pick for that. So I just think they viewed Travis Hunter as so special. They said, you know what, a lot of these teams, they got into the depth of this draft and they took the quantity approach and they were trading down and picking at guys they wanted at positions of depth. The Jags said, no, we need a franchise-altering player. We'll worry about the later rounds later. So I get the approach. I get the aggressive approach, especially for a new regime trying to fill in a lot of holes on this roster. But I think Liam Cohen knows, too. When he was with the Rams, they had Kupp and Nakua. When he was with the Bucs, they had Evans and Godwin. The value of having having two elite weapons like that, and now you have it in Hunter and Thomas, I think superseded anything else they might have thought about this draft class, on top of the fact that it's very possible you could help him at corner. A couple other picks I like. I really like Milam as a developmental offensive lineman, possibly a future starting guard. Bashal Tutin's a nice change-up in the backfield with the speed. I like Jack Kaiser. He was LB5 for me. I thought it was a really good pick just to get some depth behind Oluokun and Lloyd at linebacker. And then I think Jonah Monheim is even someone to look out for in the 7th round at center as a same thing as Milam, a developmental offensive lineman. Maybe if he gets stronger, he's got a shot to play center in the future, but he's a good guy to have around either as a center or as someone who's played all over the line at USC and can be a valuable swingman for you.
Yeah, very clearly the theme here for Jacksonville was team speed. They wanted to get faster as a team. Travis Hunter, fast. Bashal Tutin, fast. Jack Kaiser, fast. Ryan Lane, fast. Caleb Bransaw, fast. It's just that was the theme of what they wanted to do here. James Gladstone wanted to be aggressive. He wanted to make his mark on this draft. And I think that when he saw the opportunity to go get, in my opinion, I hate the generational tag for players. I think it's dumb. I think it's overused way, way, way too much. But if there's a generational player in this class, it's Travis Hunter. Somebody who can give you two-way ability and be able to be a both sides of the ball type of a playmaker for you. That's quite literally generational if he is able to do that for you, because you just don't see anybody ever do that. And so if they have plans for him to be able to play both sides of the ball and impact all 3 phases of the game, even then the value that you have for this player is incredible. I love the aggressiveness to go up and get him. This is my number 1 player in the class, so to get him at number 2, and to be honest with you, only have to give up a 1st and a 2nd round pick to go up and do it, to get the best player in this class, a player that they really need on the offensive side of the ball. I like it. The rest of this draft, I was not the biggest fan of. Just looking at what grade I gave them individually, I think that it's a B+ still, because you get Travis Hunter, and I think that that's what's most important. But Caleb Bransaw, I think, is overdrafted. I worry about him. He's got phenomenal recovery speed, but there's a reason why he's in recovery mode a lot, and I just don't think he anticipates super well. Also, this team, I think, has a plethora of slot receivers, or slot corners. Maybe they think that he's going to play safety. He mostly played in the slot this past season, so I guess I got to wait and see for his deployment there. But as a slot, I feel like this is sort of an overcrowded room anyways, and I didn't love how he anticipated as a slot defender. That only gets more difficult in the NFL. I was lower on Bashal Tutin. I understand the home run hitting ability, but somebody who constantly puts the ball on the ground, constantly fumbling, 1st percentile when it comes to fumbles over the last 2 seasons. 9 is just way too many. I also thought that, it was a super speedy back, but didn't always love how he saw the line of scrimmage either. So I think that was a little bit rich for me, although NFL teams love to bet on speed, so I can understand it. Jack Kaiser was a pick that I really liked. I like Ryan Lane as well. I think he could be a very aggressive and fast safety for them there on the back end. So there are things that I liked, but also things that I was a little bit wary of with Jacksonville. And so that's my thoughts as a whole, though. I just think that, Dalton, they wanted to get faster. They just wanted to get so much faster as a team, and that was James Gladstone's theme. Yeah,
and I believe on Ransaw, it was Gladstone, I believe, said that he views Ransaw as a safety and should be, he thinks he could be in that in at least a competition for a starting role at safety early on. He's going to move him back away from the slot. Like you mentioned, he's got a lot of options up there in the slot. So Ransaw is going to slide back and maybe compete for a starting role there.
Colts, next team we were talking about here in the AFC South. In the 1st round, it took them all but 2 seconds to turn in the card for tight end Tyler Warren at the very top. In the 2nd round, they went with Ohio State edge rusher JT Tuimoloau. 3rd round, Justin Wally, the cornerback from Minnesota. 4th round, Jalen Travis. 5th round, DJ Giddens. 6th round, a pair of picks, Riley Leonard and Tim Smith. And then in the 7th round, Hunter Wohler. We at PFF, the staff, gave this one a B- here. Chris Ballard stayed very true to his roots, a high RAS, relative athletic score, basically weight-adjusted athletic score type of drafting a bunch of big athletes anywhere he could. What do we think about this one, Dalton?
I'm in between on this. I think it got a B- from our staff because we were a little lower on Wally and Travis, right? I think they were lower on your board, certainly, than 3rd and 4th round picks. But I got to be honest with you. It's hard for me not to look at the Tyler Warren pick as maybe my favorite pick in the entire draft. And I know, there was always a possibility because their talents are relatively even that Loveland could go ahead of Warren. But I think it was a blessing in disguise that Tyler Warren got to the Colts. This was the perfect offense for him, an offense at high RPO, high yards after catch, allow Warren to be that pivot guy, right, either as a blocker in 11 personnel in the run game, as the RPO threat in the flat who's so dangerous with the ball in his hands after the catch. I actually don't think, even though he went second and maybe he's a little miffed by that, I do not think Tyler Warren could have gone to a better spot than here with Shane Steichen's offense. And, well, they just have to figure out the quarterback situation, right? So, to me, the more I look at that Warren pick and the fact that he fell to them, they didn't even have to trade up, I might bump this up to a B or a B+. I understand some of the mid-round value is questionable, but, look, I think Tuimoloau adds something to their edge unit after losing Dayo Odeyingbo in free agency. I really like DJ Giddens. Getting DJ Giddens in the 5th round, I think he could immediately be their RB2. And I got to be honest, in the same way I said about Warren, I think, if Riley Leonard was going to land somewhere late in this draft, I think this is the right spot for him. I really do. I know they already have one former Duke quarterback in Daniel Jones now there and battling with Anthony Richardson. Leonard, I'm not saying he'll factor into that competition and land in a starting role, but I'll tell you what, in this offense, I think he could manage it. He's accurate underneath. The vertical passing I have more questions about, and he's mobile. I think this is an offense he could actually run if he ever in an emergency needed to come in. So I think there's some guys who got the right landing spot here with the Colts, but especially the Tyler Warren pick just sticks out with a gold star to me. I think it's so perfect for him to be in this offense with this set of weapons.
Yeah, after reviewing it, I really do agree with you. I think that B+, B range is probably more appropriate. Obviously, it's easy to love the Tyler Warren pick. It's a phenomenal football player who fell to them at their biggest area of need, so drafting him is fantastic there. JT Tuimoloau, you mentioned, basically 1 in, 1 out on that defensive line, and you're getting sort of the same player. You're just getting him on a rookie contract, and so he will definitely be valuable for that defensive line rotation. And then the two guys in the middle, you're right, like Justin Wally and Jalen Travis. Travis is sort of just a athletic offensive tackle that you want to take a bet on. I mean, he is built like he's a massive human being. He tested the combine like an elite athlete for any offensive tackle, let alone one that has the size that he does. And those are the types of players that the Colts take a chance on. They take a chance on these bigger athletes, and they've been pretty good at developing those offensive linemen. So I'll give him the benefit of the doubt there. I think that's a good landing spot. Justin Wally, there are so many things to like about his game. I think the footwork is excellent. I think the recognition is excellent. He plays very sound and fun with his fundamentals. The only thing is, he's not super strong. He's very lean, and you can see that at the catch point. You can see that when he's tackling, but my goodness, the movement skills are fantastic for this guy. And so he moves like an NFL corner. So I even like this bet to make. And then I agree with you. DJ Giddens, I think, is RB2 on this team at some point. I think that Riley Leonard is a great scheme fit for what they're trying to do. I think Tim Smith is a good rotational interior defensive lineman as well. And then Hunter Waller at safety on the back end. Again, another athlete that you're just taking a chance on. So I think this has got to be closer to like B+, because even though a couple of those guys were overdrafted compared to where I had them on my big board, they all seem to be very much scheme fits. It seems to be a very Indianapolis Colts type of draft. And when you have that type of synergy and chemistry between your front office and your scouting staff and the guys who are coaching them on game day, I think that that's always a plus. So I'd give them a little bit of a boost there, even though they overdrafted a couple of guys in those mid-rounds.
Yeah, no, I agree, absolutely. And you mentioned it with Travis. I think Travis is an interesting project because there seems to be a feeling that this could be the last year right tackle for Braden Smith in Indianapolis. And I think if nothing else, they're throwing a dart and trying to prepare for that. Maybe get him some work at right tackle behind the scenes this year and see how they can develop him before Smith goes.
PFF's NFL draft coverage is brought to you by our friends over at Jack Links Duos. Jack Links knows that there's nothing like a great duo, and because of that, they have created the new Jack Links Duos product. What you get, 2 different flavored pieces of beef jerky in one bag. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful connection. It's a beautiful duo that they're able to form here. And they know that the NFL draft does the same thing. We've talked about this before. Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase going from LSU, now reunited in the NFL. That's a dream duo that was able to come true. Same position guys like Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, forming as a great wide receiver duo because of the NFL draft. One that we talked about already here on this show is something that Atlanta was able to do on the back end of their secondary. Jesse Bates and Xavier Watts. What a duo this is. I truly think that this has the potential to be one of the best ball hawking duos in the NFL over the next couple of years. Nobody had more interceptions at the safety spot over the last 2 seasons in college football than Xavier Watts. He was the 2023 Bronco Nagurski winner because of it, and he just continued that top-tier ball production play this past year as well. And then Jesse Bates, man, he sees the middle of the field like an absolute ball hawk. And so I think both of these guys in the same secondary gives you so much versatility, and there is so much danger to throw the ball deep and specifically over the intermediate middle with both of these guys on the field. So I think that is a dream duo for the Atlanta Falcons. Some dream duos that Jack Link's duo has, mango and jalapeno. That is my favorite. A little bit of sweetness, a little bit of heat there. They've also got the original teriyaki duo, the buffalo and ranch duo. A tried true classic. Find Jack Link's duos wherever you get Jack Link's beef jerky, local convenience stores, or even select Walmarts as well. Marching along here in the AFC South as we're doing our draft grades here for them. Tennessee Titans are next. Let's start with the team that started us off here at number 1 overall. Cam Ward. It goes number 1 overall to this team, so their first-round pick there. Femi Oladejo, the edge rusher from UCLA, in the second. Third round, they get Kevin Winston Jr. Fourth round, they had 3 selections. Chimere Dike, the wide receiver from Florida. Gunnar Helm, the tight end from Texas. And then Alec Iomaner, the wide receiver from Stanford. Fifth round, they go with Sacramento State guard Jackson Slater, who I think is probably going to be a center at the NFL level just because of lack of length, but interior offensive lineman there nonetheless. And then in the 6th round, cornerback Marcus Harris, and then running back Khalil Mullings as those two 6th round picks. Our staff gave the Tennessee Titans an A. What do you think about that, Dalton? You agree with an A?
I might even give it an A+ because they're, one guy. Wow. I know I have to mention it, or at least I feel like I have to mention it. But the very first UDFA that they signed was Xavier Restrepo. I love that, and getting him back with Cam Ward. I feel like he should have just been added to the bottom of that graphic there. But no, this draft, this is mostly about Cam Ward and building around Cam Ward. And I think in 4th round guys, 3 4th-round picks, DK, Helm, and Iomaner, I think you got pretty good value. I know DK we thought would go a little bit lower, but also getting Iomaner in the 4th round when we thought he was almost a lock 2nd-round pick. I think you've got open competition at receiver. Love that. Those 2 guys, Restrepo, they brought in Van Jefferson. We know Calvin Ridley's a lock, obviously, so number 1 guy, but I think that's what it's going to be about, is just who emerges as the primary weapons. They spent a lot of money on Dan Moore Jr. in free agency, fixing up the offensive line. I think they're moving J.C. Latham back to the right side, see if he's more comfortable over there. So the O-line was taken care of in free agency. The receiving core, the weaponry is taken care of in the draft. Now they just got to have these open competitions. And then it's just about Cam Ward. And I got to say, the other pick that stands out to me, I know we've talked about it all week, is getting Kevin Winston Jr. in the 3rd round. I believe it was 82nd overall. This is a steal. You're talking about a guy who, if he was healthy this year, he had partially torn ACL, only played 2 games. If he was healthy, he may have been a late 1st-round pick this year. And to get him on the back end of your defense, I've mentioned it, I think he's the best tackler in the entire class at any position. He's got instincts down near the line of scrimmage as good as any safety in this draft. He's got to work on it, got to get more experience in coverage, especially if he's going to play back deep. But I think Winston's a fantastic value in the 3rd round. But this draft is about Cam Ward, surrounding him with weapons, and Brian Callahan building this offense the way he wants to.
Yeah, I can see why the staff gave this one an A. You start off the way that you need to with Cam Ward. You got great value in Kevin Winston Jr. and Alec Iomaner compared to my board and the PFF board. And then I think it was a solid last 3 picks for them as well. Some fan favorites, some guys that I think could make some impacts on that roster in the depth positions. I'd give it a B, though, just because it was up and down for me. Cam Ward, okay, you did what you were supposed to. You took Cam Ward at number 1. That's fine. I think Femi Oladejo was an overdraft in the 2nd round, especially with the types of edge rushers and the specific edge rushers that were still left on the board. Love getting Kevin Winston Jr. in the 3rd. Excellent value there. Chimere Dike, I think, overdrafted in the 4th. Gunnar Helm, fine, appropriately drafted in the 4th. Excellent value for Alec Iomater. And so it was a very up and down draft for me. And so maybe close to a B+, B+, something like that. I wouldn't quite give it an A because there are still a couple of reaches, in my opinion, that they made in this draft. But the draft's all about making bets. And so, they're betting on Chimere Dike. They're betting on Femi Oladejo. They're certainly betting on, with Oladejo, they're hoping that Senior Bowl tape that we saw from him is going to be much more the regular moving forward. So I'd be a little bit lower on this one. I'd give this one a B+, just because I do think it was up and down. But you have to love the steals that they got in Kevin Winston Jr. I completely agree with you. I think Alec Iomaner could be wide receiver 2 on this team. I really do. There are some catching concerns with him. But, I mean, he also has some incredible contested catches, right? And so, like, the drops aren't always a stable metric like I think that some people make them out to be. I think that drops can be improved upon, and there's a reason why every year I think that it's viewed as that unstable metric for us, because some years it could be fantastic, some years you could have a handful of drops, and for Isle Maynor, he at least shows me that he can make strong contested catches. He just has a couple of head scratchers of it's like, man, I wish you really would have really come down with that. You probably should have. So if he hones in on it, if he focuses in on it, and if he really takes being a 4th round draft pick personal, then I think that we're going to get a motivated dude who's going to be wide receiver 2 on this team sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I agree. The only other thing I'll say with Oladejo is if they had taken him at 35, I might be a lot more skeptical on it. But the fact that they traded down from 35 to get more picks, and they really needed more picks, because at the time coming into the draft, that 35th overall pick, that was their only day 2 selection. So at least trading back, they traded back down to 52. I forget all the details of it, but allowing them to get more picks, I believe including possibly the Winston pick. And you know, we saw a bunch of trades on day 2 and day 3. I don't remember all the details, but to get more picks, to still get Oladejo, then to get Winston and all the weapons, I'm a fan of them maneuvering down from that 35th overall pick to do that.
A last team that we're talking about here is the Houston Texans. They traded out of the first round, traded with the New York Giants as they popped to the very part of the second round for the Giants to go up and get Jackson Dart. So at the top of the second round, they took Iowa State wide receiver Jaden Higgins, and then later in the second round, they took offensive tackle Ariante Ursary. Third round, they reunited the Cyclones duo, wide receiver Jalen Knoll from Iowa State as well, and then in the third round, cornerback Jalen Smith from USC. Fourth round, Woody Marks, running back from USC as well. Sixth round, they had Jaden Reed, the safety from Penn State, and then Graham Mertz, the quarterback from Florida. And then in the 7th round, Keontae Hamilton and Luke Lachey, their 2 7th-round picks there. We give the Texans a B, solid B from the PFF staff here. Your thoughts? Would you stick with the B? Would you go a little higher, lower? What do you think?
I think a B is about right, because I really like their first 3 picks, and I'm not the biggest a fan of the rest of them. But if I'm going to like, 3 picks in your draft, it may as well be the first 3, right? So I think, look, they needed offensive line talent, and I like that they got Ariante Ursary where they did in the second round. And look, this team, to me, they had 4 very clear needs. Offensive line talent, they needed help at receiver. I would have liked to have seen them take one of these run-stopping defensive tackles. Somebody like a C.J. West in the 3rd or the 4th would have made me really happy with this class. And then a blocking tight end, maybe Luke Lachey is that guy in the 7th round coming from Iowa. So I'll cut that one some slack, because that was more of a day 3 goal anyway. But I think the first thing you look at is Higgins and Knoll, the Iowa State pair that they got. And we don't know what the deal is with Tank Dell, obviously. Christian Kirk comes in, but that's probably only a 1-year deal. Obviously Jalen Knoll maybe even competes with Kirk for snaps in the slot, but you got an immediate starter in Higgins, you got an explosive player in Knoll, you got a talented player in Ursary, and I think we're going to see a lot of open competition on this offensive line. Maybe he factors into that. So I really do like these first 3 picks a lot, and I like that they just said, you know what, we're going to trade down, we're going to get some value from the Giants from this pick. We're not going to force offensive line, because the top 3 interior offensive linemen in this draft all went in the first 24 picks. So they didn't even get a chance to take one of those guys. Even if they wanted, say, Donovan Jackson there at, 25, they couldn't even get him, because the Vikings took him 1 spot ahead. So I think it was smart to trade back instead of forcing anything. And to get these 2 receivers, and obviously they already played together at Iowa State for a couple of years, they're both really talented. They bring different skill sets, and I think you make C.J. Stroud's life a lot easier, because one of the themes aside from the pass protection was when you watch him in that playoff game against the Chiefs, it was Nico Collins and it was nobody else, and he was the only answer. Now you've got answers. You've got Jaden Higgins, you've got Jalen Knoll who can get vertical. They brought in Christian Kirk. Eventually they'll have Tank Dell back. We'll see where that coincides with the Knoll pick here. But I think the first 3 picks I really, really love. The rest of it, I think Smith was an overdraft. I think Marks, I like Woody Marks as a player, but when there's guys to me like DJ Giddens and Devin Neal and even a Damian Martinez, 3 of my top 10 backs, I should say top 12 backs still on the board, I don't know that I would have gone Woody Marks there. And then, the weird one for me, and I know we were surprised about on drafting, I was surprised Graham Mertz got drafted after the year that he just had. But, a 6th-round pick, it is what it is if you like the guy. I just think it was surprising to see him get drafted at all after everything he went through this year.
I like this draft. I think I do. The longer that I looked at it, the more that I thought about the draft strategy here, I could go with a B plus for this one. There's a couple of reaches for sure, but they are sort of staying closer to their identity here. I think both the wide receivers are excellent. Ariante Ursary, I'm a little bit worried about in the NFL just in general, but for where they got him, I think it's fine. He's an explosive offensive tackle. That first step is great. He's great in zone blocking. Hey, he's a little inflexible. He's a little bit of a waist bender. Doesn't really have the length that you want. So there's some issues there for him that you got to work out. But hey, it's a bet along the offensive line. They made that a theme in this offseason, so I'm not going to be too hard on that one, even though I have a little bit of concerns for him. The Jalen Smith, I thought he was drafted way too early, but it's sort of like the Texans just can't help themselves to getting defensive backs that they like. I think that Jalen Reed is kind of the same thing as well. Woody Marks, you're right. There were other running backs that I had ranked ahead of him who were still on the board, but specifically for this team, I think that he could be the third down or receiving back of the future, because I think that maybe you could move on from Dario Gungawale, although he is good at pass protection as well. So maybe there's some competition there if you think that Marks brings more in the receiving game. They don't really have that back outside of Joe Mixon. As much as I love Dameon Pierce, they just don't utilize him in that role very often. So perhaps you're getting a plus in the passing game by adding Woody Marks there. The 6th and 7th round guys I don't think will be too impactful for this team, but B plus. I can understand it. It's even though I wish maybe they would have gone a little bit of a different angle when they picked Jalen Smith and maybe even Jalen Reed, because it looks like they already had their secondary pretty much filled out. I wish that they would have gone different directions, maybe double dipped on the offensive line, something like that. It just feels like it's very much their identity. So I can't sit here and praise other teams for having great chemistry with what they want to be as a scouting staff and then a coaching staff of the types of players they want to acquire. I can't praise that for one team and then really hurt another team for such a strategy, even if I didn't love the players that they were bringing in this class with the value of where they were picked. This is just sort of what they do. So it kind of is what it is. B plus, I think, is appropriate there for the Texans. Any other thoughts on Houston before we get out of here?
Yeah, no, I just think about alternatives like Smith and Marks. If that instead was, say, Dylan Sampson and C.J. West, who were both available at that point, I think this would be an A or close to an A plus draft for me. That's the only thing, is I think those mid-round picks could have been used better, but I do like their first 3 picks a lot.
We're halfway through the NFL with draft grades, but if you have not subscribed to the channel yet, make sure you do so you don't miss the other half of the NFL that we're getting to later in the week. And then, of course, all sorts of post-draft coverage that we're going to have throughout the summer as well. If you liked the video as well, if you enjoyed it, that would really help out the channel. And make sure that you guys are getting that PFF Plus subscription right now, because you save 25% on doing so if you use the promo code DRAFT25. So head on over to PFF.com. Make sure you get that PFF Plus subscription at a discount right now. Now's the time to jump in on it, because I know you're going to use the fantasy football tools, the betting tools, all the premium stats during the NFL season. And then, of course, next year, for next year's draft, the draft guide, the premium stats there, everything, man. The fully unlocked mock draft simulator, all that great stuff. You can save 25% on that yearly subscription right now using the promo code DRAFT25. Like I said, we're halfway through the NFL with our draft grades. We got another 2 divisions coming for you tomorrow. For Dalton Wasserman, I'm Trevor Sikkema saying thank you guys so much for watching the PFF NFL show. We'll see you guys next time.